Goodness. Are we that? It's only 10:57 and we're starting recording?
I don't want to forget.
Gotcha. Okay, so we'll have to limit our pre-game commentary.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Charles. And there's our other member, Jan.
Expect Jan to show up here any moment. I only have 10:57 according to the phone here. Got the flag here. We're in good shape.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Jeff.
Sounds like Jeff.
I am here.
That was one of the challenges of doing Zoom meetings, is to recognize everyone's voice.
Well, I don't know who Phil is.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, good morning,
Jeff.
Jan.
There's
Hi, Jeff,
Jan.
you're a little echoey there.
I am.
You are. You sound like you're at the bottom of a well.
Oh, let me see if I can fix that.
Maybe he
Oh.
is.
I'm not.
Jan, it's good to see you on Zoom because if you were here, I would feel real guilty that I didn't bring your maple candies that I got you.
Oh, thank you. I requested, Charles was in Vermont and I requested maple candy.
Yeah. These are actually from New Hampshire.
Oh, dear.
A little place called Pure Maple or something, or Only Maple or little, we went off the road and down a dirt road and found this place because, you know, my wife looked it up and Google was telling us where to go and come across this little place. And I ended up talking to the guy afterwards. And it's actually quite an operation. They have 66,000 taps they put onto trees.
Wow.
Yeah, they have a lot of acres away from where they were in their own facility for packaging and stuff. So, but anyway, it was fun trip. All right.
Glad
My
you got
clock-
away.
My clock tells me it's 11 o'clock and we have all three board members here. So I think we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. If the clerk could call the roll.
Mr. Enns,
Yes.
Miss Marks,
Here.
Mr. Burbo,
Here.
you have a quorum.
All right. Thank you, Sasha. Your first roll call.
Thank you.
Okay, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance since I have the flag handy right here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And let's see, at this point, we will go to public comment for any matters not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment?
At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. And I have nobody for public comment.
Okay, in that case, we will move on to our next item, which is the report from the interim executive director, Patty.
Thank you very much. So first and foremost, I want to welcome our new employee, Yvonne Diaz. She's our new analyst that's backfilling Cheryl's position. We're really pleased to have Yvonne with us. She's doing an outstanding job already, slipping into the position, grasping the concepts. SB 1383, as you know, is huge. She had zero experience with SB 1383, but she still is just wrapping her head around it and actually pointing out things that Kelly and I have missed or system improvements already. So I can't tell you how much we're glad to have her on board. Next up is the county withdrawal documents. You know, those are in your packet, if I'm not mistaken, on page 6 through 9. Just wanted to point out, I've been getting a lot of phone calls from our special districts members concerned a little bit about the language. And the language has to do with the section where it just says that the IWMA's efforts will no longer be countywide and will only be within the unincorporated cities, meaning everything that's unincorporated is now county territory. And they just wanted clarity on that. So just an FYI that you might get some phone calls on that too. Again, we do have 17 special districts with us, and one is not, and that's Los Osos. So any questions on that before I move forward?
I don't, and I think in the discussions with Jeff Minery, we will respond to that letter at an appropriate time after the county is no longer a member.
Sounds good.
Um,
Next up, oh, go ahead.
And but in our verbal discussions with the county, they certainly understand that despite that particular wording that some might think they fully understand that the unincorporated areas they're referring to are do not include the CSDs that are represented on the board.
Excellent. Next up, JPMOA documents in your packet. We just gave you a sample of what was actually sent out to the county. Now, the special districts got a little bit different, and then the cities got a little bit different packet. But I just wanted to give you an FYI that all have been received. I followed up with phone calls to each entity. Some people I was able to reach, others I had to leave messages, but just wanted to make sure that they, one, received the documents, and two, to give us a call if they have any questions, problems, or issues.
So-
Next up.
Wait, Patty, on that, when I read this letter, I was a little confused at the end. And I assume this is just because we probably took the city letter and changed it a little bit, but in the last paragraph of this letter to the county, it says, "It is our anticipation that your city council will consider these amendments prior to November 15th. I
That is
assume
true.
that's just a leftover from, because the wording of this letter is probably almost identical to what went to the cities, and that
Mhm.
sentence came from there. Okay,
Mhm.
gotcha. Okay.
And if I might, President Barbeau, for the benefit of the executive committee, we were informed yesterday that the county intends to get the JPA amendment before the Board of Supervisors on November 16th.
One thing along these lines, though, that is important is I know that in Atascadero, was not on our October 26th thing. It will be on our November, whatever our first meeting in November is, which is the week of November 15th, but it's like the 12th or something. Are we tracking with the cities that they are putting on this on their, at least by their first November meeting, if not their last October meetings, which already occurred? Sure.
Yes,
know
we
if
are.
anybody already did it.
Yes, we are tracking. We're following up. Sasha's been integral in this. She's going to help us out moving forward as well on this, to just follow up with each of the 7 cities and then the special districts and the county with their clerks once the information's agendized, approved or not, signed, and then get it back to us.
Because the concern is that, cities build their agendas a couple weeks ahead of time. And so or they build them longer than that. But as far as fairly last minute things that can go on a consent calendar, they need them, like at least 10 days out, usually 2 weeks out. And some cities are already going to be having a meeting the first Tuesday in November next week. And so it would be important to know if anybody has missed that, if that's what their meeting schedule is. And even for people like Atascadero, where we meet the second week, that agenda is almost built by now and would be, getting published in the middle of next week. So, I just want to make sure that we, every city has a chance to do this. And you did state in the letter to them that, hey, we need you to do this before November 15th. I hope some of them, that it doesn't slip by some of them.
We'll keep following up on this.
Okay, thank you.
Good point. Thank you. And then fourth and final on the oral report here is our contract with HF&H ends December of 2021. Now, just a reminder for everybody listening here, because this is hard to keep straight. We actually have two separate contracts with HF&H. One goes until, and that's the strategic plan contract. The original contract goes until November 30th of 2022. And our records indicate that we still have about $21,000 left on that contract, yet to be completed, again, because we didn't know county in, out, how is this gonna change moving forward. So we're looking to move forward with finalizing those parts and pieces on this first contract coming up. And then the second contract, which I can't tell you how much I appreciate Rob and his team's work and effort on this one. This is the one where they developed all those franchise agreements, amendments, worked with the cities and their legal and the special districts and their legal to get that franchise SB 1383 stuff updated, amended, moving forward to their councils or boards, as well as the ordinances. You know, everybody's unique. We had, 18 different ordinances, right? And so the work that they put into this was a real heavy lift for our member agencies. And moving forward, we honestly, we didn't have the bandwidth, couldn't have done it without them, especially since the franchise agreements alone were 20 plus contracts, right? It's just amazing how many individual contracts are in this county, not to mention the ordinances and the other help and support that they gave on this contract with the task force, or just the local task force, the industry meetings, et cetera. So they've just been invaluable. On this secondary contract that's due to end here in December 31st, we don't have all the invoices in yet. We're still looking for that October invoice. And this is where we redirected the HF&H to do this updated verification rate study as well. We have about 100,000 left in that. So I didn't mean to take a deep dive in this, just a cursory overview, just to bring everybody up to speed and a little refresher on these two contracts that we have with HF&H.
I do see that Mark, that Jan has a question.
Yes.
Yes, Jan.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the cities are asking for more detailed analysis of the underlying factual justification for the rate increase. And we've gotten pretty thorough, in my opinion, not that I'm an expert on this, but pretty thorough analysis of the 1383. But what about the rest of the budget? That's not just implementing the new organic waste mandate, but the rest of the budget. Is that being covered under the contract that expires on November 30th, 2022?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your question is.
Jan, are you referring to like reviewing all of our programs or something that some members have and some of the resolutions have suggested we do, or what?
The question is whether the jurisdictions will be able to justify the 218 process that they each need to go through. And in order to do that, they need to have a fine-grained analysis of the budget. And so my question was whether that is within the scope of the contract that expires November 30th, 2022, or whether we're looking at something that would be included in the one that ends in December of this year.
Well, we're going to take a deep dive into this later on in this agenda. So that's an excellent question. If we can put that on hold, because then I'll have Rob Hilton's input on that, because I don't want to speak for his team and his team's bandwidth. But again, we will dive into this. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Before we move on, any questions on the credit card or expense reports?
No, but Patty, I do want to back up just a second. You mentioned that on the original strategic planning contract, we have about $21,000 left. When we talk, about forming a committee, which is a separate agenda item, making changes to the JPA, that to me, sounds a little bit related to strategic planning.
Mhm.
Because it's about this, the strategic future of the IWMA, those potential amendments to the JPA. That might be a thing, and we can talk about it under that item, but bottom line is we have $21,000 left in that contract to use for strategic planning purposes. And that
Mhm.
might become a possible area in which to do it. So, but we can talk about that more because I see, that's an agenda item as well. So,
Sounds great.
Okay.
Any questions on the credit card or expenses before we move on?
No questions.
Okay. Then that concludes my oral report.
okay, so then we are ready to move on to the consent agenda, consisting of minutes for past executive committee and full board meetings, but also the proposed executive board meeting calendar for 2022. And on that, I'd like to, and just had a couple of questions, we don't need to pull it. Because as you noted, so if everybody would go to page 52, as you noted on there, there's some issues. Obviously, we're not going to meet on December 31st, New Year's Eve day, because that actually would be the holiday for our staff and others for New Year's Day being on the Saturday. So we do need to adjust that. It's wrong in August to say that Friday, July 29th would not be the Friday before Labor Day weekend. Because Labor Day weekend is in September. It actually would affect that Friday, September 2nd date. But anyway, Jan, you have your hand raised, and we're going to need to propose alternates for a couple of those dates as indicated there. Jan, did you have your hand raised?
I would suggest moving the executive committee meeting prior to the month of January. I would suggest moving that to December 17th, which is a Friday. Almost nothing gets done between then and New Year's. That's been my experience. Trying to get stuff completed that is not about the holidays is like almost impossible. So if we moved it up a week, would that hurt anything?
That would be up 2 weeks, actually, but
2 weeks, yeah.
and which would put it, almost. The only problem I see with that, Jen, is that's well, I guess it's 10 days after, because the full board meeting is December 8th, right? So it's like only 1 week after the full board meeting. I understand what you're saying, because a lot of people may be gone anyway in this 2 week period. I don't know. Does anybody else have any input on that? Or Patty, what do you think?
Well, we have our first board meeting on Wednesday, January 12th, just keeping that in mind as I'm looking at the
Right.
calendar here. And is January 7th? I know that's a tight turnaround.
That's not enough turnaround for you guys.
Mm.
I mean, we could put it on January 5th or 4th or something. Otherwise, I mean, Jan's
Yeah.
point is valid about moving it up, but is that getting it too close to December's meeting?
Can everybody do Monday the 3rd for the executive committee meeting?
Yes.
Okay, January.
I have a hard stop at 1 p.m. on that day for the law school. But I could meet between 11 and 1 or 10:30 and
Okay,
um,
that would work for me to, I mean, we being the executive, we should be able to keep that within your time frame. I know this is going to be a longer meeting today probably, but we should be able to keep that within your time frame. So maybe January 3rd for that meeting.
January 3rd is good for me.
yeah, that would work. But I am
Okay.
going to have to duck out about 10 minutes till one.
Sure. I
So we have
understand.
January 3rd, which is a Monday at 11 o'clock. Change made.
Okay, and then Friday before Memorial Day, not as concerned about that myself, but at least not this far ahead. But does anybody else have any comments regarding that? I mean, we're meeting at 11, so it's not as if we're, pushing it into the afternoon for anybody trying to get out of town.
Yeah, I will be out of town the week of the 25th and through the first week in August at this point.
Wait, I'm talking May right now, though.
Oh, I was talking about July. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, if I'm going down looking at the months in
Okay.
which Patty made red notes,
Alrighty.
talking about May 27th.
May 27th is okay with me.
Robert, what do you think?
I think that I might not be on the executive committee by then. I'm
Oh.
not sure. When do we change officers?
July, so yeah,
Oh,
you
okay.
would be, yeah,
27th is good with me.
okay.
Okay, that remains unchanged.
Okay, unchanged, then July 1st, Friday before July 4th. And July 4th is the Monday. Monday is the official holiday. So I don't have a problem with the first, but does anybody else? Now that one, Robert, you could pass on commenting, I guess.
Okay. Just being sensitive to that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, July 1st would be okay with me.
okay,
No changes on that one.
okay. And then Friday, July 29th is not a problem, but August, or rather, the next one is actually the potential problem of Friday, September 2nd, because Labor Day would be just September 5th. I don't have a problem with that one either. I mean, Jan, what about you?
If we could go back to July,
Okay,
I would not be able to make it on the 29th.
oh, on July 29th, okay.
Right, but
That's
I could make
Monday.
it, the 22nd,
Okay,
which would be the week before.
yeah. Again, that would only be 9 days after our full board meeting in July
Mhm.
18th. What if, what about July 25th? In other words, or you're leaving that whole week though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if things go well, if the pandemic will let us, we're going to be in Canada during those 2 weeks.
got it.
Mhm.
Whether the Canadians will let you in, okay.
If they'll let us in or if they'll let us come back.
Yeah, that's right. That's always, yeah, you got to account for both directions now. Well, then I think probably the 22nd is the best thing unless we moved it to August 1st. But did you say you're not coming back till the 1st?
Right.
Oh, then, yeah. Well, either July 22nd or thing like August 2nd, something. Because I'm sorry, dang it. Because the full board meeting is August 10th. So yeah, either back it up a week to July 22nd, which again is only 9 days after the full board meeting. Which means you'd be publishing an executive committee meeting agenda almost immediately after the full board meeting. I'd be more inclined to move it to like August 2nd or 3rd. We used to have the executive committee meetings a week before. We're doing this change in order to allow more time. But I think when the Friday before, doesn't work, we should probably move closer to the meeting date in general. Just thinking out loud there, Patty, do you have comments on that?
Sounds good. Either day will work for us. The second, third, better the second.
How about the second, Jan, since both you and I have Rotary on Wednesdays? We've been missing a lot of those lately.
The 2nd of August, I'll
August.
probably still be out of town.
Oh, okay. What about the third then?
Yeah, well, I know I'll be back the week of the 8th for sure. You know, you could
Right,
go ahead with only 2 people. That's still a quorum. So.
true. Okay, well, because I mean, the 8th is too late because of the meeting, the full board meeting is on the 10th, so we can't really well have
Right.
the executive committee meeting on the 8th. So.
So if the 22nd would work for Patty,
Yeah,
could
okay.
we do
Then-
that?
We could, I think it puts a little tightness on the, on what comes out, whatever actions come out of the full board meeting, but we could do the 22nd.
Okay, the 22nd it is.
22nd of
Okay.
July for the August, it's the executive committee meeting for the August board meeting, full board meeting. Okay, and then, so then back to Friday, September 2nd, work for you, Jen?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, that works for me. And then the rest of the dates work for me. We don't have oh, never mind. It's all there. Okay. So you've noted those changes, Patty, or
Yes,
Sasha or somebody?
Yes.
I have.
Okay, so then in that case, we'll consider the consent calendar, all 3 items, but we'll go to see if there's any public comment on the consent agenda items. These are items 6, 7, and 8 on the agenda. So Barbara, do you want to, or Sasha, or whoever's requesting public comment? You want to see if we have any?
Sorry, I apparently muted myself.
Okay.
If a member of the public wishes to make comment on consent items 6, 7, and 8, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press star 9. I have no public comment for consent.
All right, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll take a motion, bring it back to the board or to the executive committee and see if we have a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second,
All right, so we move a motion by Marks, second by Enns for approval of the consent agenda. Please read the roll.
Mr. Burbo,
Yes.
Ms. Marks,
Yes.
Mr. Inns.
yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And we will move on then to our regular agenda, beginning with item number 9. We'll allow public comment on each after they're introduced. So Patty, please introduce item number 9.
This is just bottom line, the results of our meeting with the county, not only county staff, but county legal yesterday. And as you can see from your agenda packet on page 53, we went through a number of items, given the county withdrawal and how both entities are going to work together through all of these items: household hazardous waste, e-waste, curbside oil collection, the local ordinances, the take back programs, outreach and education, grant funding, who's going to be reporting, et cetera. And then, of course, the changes that need to be made at the landfill, material recovery facilities, et cetera. I can't go into detail on the meeting because we're still working through the details, but the overall impression, I think, all parties walked away. It was a wonderful meeting. We made a lot of progress. We still have a lot of work to do to iron out everything, but it was a great meeting, a great start. And it was just positive. That's all I have to say. And for the benefit of our community, we're all working together. Great news.
All right, thank you. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. All right, with that, Chan,
Charles?
Robert, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm concerned about, I guess I want to say, the administrative cost of managing these different, how this breaks up. You know, you've got all these subjects on here. And when a person comes in, for example, let's just do education and outreach, and you've got the county participating in a public forum of some kind, a classroom. They have students from the county in the class, and there's got to be a way to reimburse the IWMA for educating those members in the county that are now using the IWMA services. And along with just the actual cost of that, there's a huge administrative cost of keeping track of this, invoicing the county for things that we do for them. And I wondered if any of that type of thing was discussed.
It was,
Yeah.
it really was. And you know, the county was really open to it. And I will be working directly with Wendy Hall to get all those numbers hammered out, for lack of a better word. And yeah, all those things were brought up, put
Yeah.
on the table and discussed.
Yeah, Robert, and we've specifically brought up that, you know, to the extent the IWMA would continue to provide a given service, that in addition to our direct costs for doing that, you know, we have staff time invested in running those services, managing them, you know, whether it's managing contracts, whatever,
Yes.
and that there would have to be some, you know, charge for that as well, and they understood that. So
Did
it's a
you,
great point, but it was a point that was made in the meeting and was accepted by the county staff.
okay, so they recognize that there will be some costs for us to keep track of all this stuff.
Yeah, there's an administrative cost. I mean, we're not gonna, you know, the premise being, you know, we're not gonna try to make a mint off of them or that we're gonna nickel and dime them, but they recognize that it would be an unfair subsidy or free ride on their
Mhm.
part if we ran a whole program and, you know, and they didn't pay for, or if they only paid for the direct costs. They understood that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's the cost of everything we do then, I'm kind of referring to the letter that Wade Horton wrote. Everything that we do, technically, they own 25% of all our effort, and we could bill them that way too. Just
Well, I
No.
wouldn't agree for technical reasons that they own 25%.
No,
no, they
but-
don't own it, but they in Wade's letter says, you know, we're 25 point something percent of all the population. And again, if we're educating all of the population, they owe us 25% of the cost of doing that. It just might be another way to handle the costs.
President Barbeau, if I might chime in.
Jess, go ahead. and then Jan.
Following the meeting with the county yesterday, myself and county council were directed to work together to put together a transitionary agreement that will address all the concerns that were raised by Director Enns. And I think that we will iron out all these details in a satisfactory way that is equitable both for the IWMA and for the county. So Patty has assured us that allocation of these administrative costs are not that difficult to determine. And it appears that a lot of the systems are already in place to identify how costs are associated with the unincorporated areas versus the cities, and CSDs are separated out as a matter of course. So we should be able to dial it in relatively close to the satisfaction of this committee.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Just one more question then is, you know, the letter that came from Wade Horton said, send us $1 million. And if that's their opening then I think this may be more difficult than what you're reporting, but I hope not. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could comment, I think those are very separate issues. They need to be kept very separate. The JPA says they have no right to assets as a withdrawing entity. On the other hand, what we're talking about is a kind of a contractual fee for services arrangement that is probably going to be interim until the county decides if they want to duplicate those services or if they want to keep contracting with the IWMA. But that's a very different, we need to keep those two sets of negotiations separate, in my opinion.
Jen, I think you're correct. And what we talked about with Jeff is that, and I think I mentioned it at the beginning of this meeting, we'll respond to that letter separately after November 15th.
Okay, good.
I'm good with that. Thank you. I'm just frankly surprised that Wade Horton would sign that letter.
I think you just have to consider the context, and given the language, it's, I think it's something we can readily deal with after November 15th.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay, so that's item 9. I think we should check if there's any public comment on item 9 before we move on to item 10.
At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment on item number 9 on regular agenda, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I have nobody for public comment.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 10.
Okay, so this boils right down to the HF&H report, draft report that I regrettably had to send out just before the last IWMA board meeting in October. Again, apologize about the short notice. But during that board meeting, thankfully, HF&H gave a presentation and fielded some questions from the board. During that, after that board meeting and subsequent comments from member agencies, both Rob and I fielded questions and received feedback from city staff. And again, the member agencies, that they wanted more time. They wanted more time to look into this, and they wanted more time to provide comment. So I don't know, Rob, are you here with us today?
Oh, hello there. Yes, I am.
So, and I don't know, Rob, forgive me, I'm paraphrasing for you, and I want to make sure that that's the same feedback that you heard as well. Did you hear something else?
Yeah, I heard that the city managers were working together with their finance staff to really understand the interaction between this document and their processes for rate adjustment. In particular, I think there was a fair bit of concern that in some of the agencies, there is no Prop 218 process for solid waste because the facts of their situation don't require a Prop 218 process, while others do follow 218 process for their solid waste rates because their facts are a bit different. And so really trying to make sure that the way that we structure this is useful to both groups. And there were comments both on the substance of the analysis, policy issues like the reserve target and costs of existing programs versus those same programs going forward, as well as just process related questions. So they indicated that they wanted to get a subgroup of the city managers together with us, which I would certainly welcome. I think that would be very helpful to talk through those issues, to discuss how this gets sort of reformatted and reframed. And there was also some discussion of the matter that Jan brought up earlier in the discussion about sort of reviewing the existing costs of the JPA and determining sort of what's available to be reduced beyond just the obvious things that we included in our first analysis. So we're very happy to support the group in whatever way makes sense in doing that.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, the assumption with the original budget under Brooke Stayer was that the county was going to be there for the next year at least. And Brooks was going to be there for the next year. So obviously there's been a bit of a sea change there. And for the entities that need to do the 218 analysis and need to justify it so they can avoid litigation and also build public trust is, they need to have the specifics, the specific facts analyzed and stated so that it's clear what the cost of services in our reduced scope would really be. And to me, it's completely understandable that the 1383 costs are somewhat uncertain because there's nothing to compare it to. We don't know. So that's for sure understood. But for our ongoing functions, we need to figure out how to scale that back. And I'm concerned because Rob's group is saying 10% reduction, and the MSW is saying 25% reduction as a result of the county withdrawal, basing that on population. Well, it's not based on, they're not basing it on accounts. You could have 6 people in a family and 1 account, for instance, So somewhere between 10% and 25%, just assuming that they're both kind of reasonable guesstimates, we need to have the entities need to have some kind of really firm basis for what exactly the county withdrawal means in financial terms for the IWMA.
Janet, the percentages you're referring to, are you referring to potential reduction in revenue because of the loss of those accounts in terms of paying into the IWMA coffers, or what?
Yeah,
you were
I
talking
think,
about the 10 versus 25, or you were talking about a percentage of reduction of revenue? Is that what you're referring to?
yeah,
Okay.
I'm certainly open to clarification on that, but it's just like, the big question, what does it mean financially to have the county withdraw? MSW, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, was saying, well, 25% would be taken away with the county into the rural jurisdictions.
Which is totally
then-
unrealistic and wrong.
Yeah, I question that very much so, yes.
And we
But
think that
then we're being told 10%, and I don't know what the basis is for that. So those numbers, I think the data is there. They just need to be repackaged and sharpened up to the point that the jurisdictions that do have to do the 218, and I'll tell you, the public really looks at all that through a magnifying glass and subject to a lot of scrutiny. We need to be able to justify those numbers. So that's kind of where they're coming from, I think.
Rob, can you address the 10% piece? We don't need to
Yeah.
dissect this in great detail, but that particular piece, I think you have an answer for that, do you not?
Yeah, what we did was we looked to just the accounts, because that's the basis that your percentage-based fee is paid on. And we tried to understand which accounts were in the unincorporated area of the county that was not covered by a CSD, and those that were in the CSDs or in cities, and we separated it that way. The best data that we had from the California Department of Finance on household counts between the CSDs and in the unincorporated county gave us that 10% factor. We believe that the MSW report may have assumed that the CSDs would stay with the county. The other dynamic that comes into play on some of the costs is that the business community tends to stay in the cities and in the CSDs. Those business customers are more prevalent in the denser population areas. And so the unincorporated area appears to have very few commercial accounts that are not already in a CSD and would remain. And the revenue generation from a commercial account is many times greater than it is from a residential account. So that sort of skews the percentages even further. Now, all of that said, as generous as the garbage companies were in providing us data about the customers, even they don't have extremely good data on the county versus the CSDs. They think of it, as a fairly continuous operation. And so there were certain assumptions that were made. And one of the things that I would really value is working with the city managers and their teams on what data do you have that might help refine this and make it more precise for us, so that, to the question, we're not just putting a thumb up in the air and hoping that's close.
I think the key point here, though, is that, MSW picked a number. It wasn't out of thin air. It was based on population count. It did not take into consideration the fact that in those rural areas, you have some non-mandatory service areas. So you have significant numbers of that population that don't have any garbage service, and so represent a much smaller percentage of total garbage bills to be levied with our fee. And then secondly, the commercial aspect that Rob noted. And so for me, Rob's 10% number makes perfect sense. What I will say, though, is in the report that was sort of alluded to, and it was kind of mentioned in some areas, but how the actual table, if you took, there wasn't like a good table or something that showed how you got there. And I think that's the kind of thing, I don't think it needs to be, quote, redone. It needs to be reworded. Because I think, maybe the city managers or others looking at it go, wait, I'm not sure how, you got to this. And they need to be able, in their mind, be able to feel like, okay, this makes sense. This is how much revenues are going to go down. And this equates then to what's needed in terms of a rate increase. I would also look, though, that, Rob originally was tasked to say, okay, how much more are we going to spend doing 1383 pre-county exiting talks? How much additional costs is there that has to do with implementing 1383? And then therefore we need to raise the rates X. And that's still what we're, really essentially getting at. And we do have to take into account the reduced revenue from the loss of county folks. But as far as this reduced cost piece on other things we may or may not do, that's not directly related to 1383. That's related to ongoing management.
Yeah.
And even some of the county, Rob can figure out the revenue loss due to the county leaving, but we can't figure out to the extent that the county would pay us to continue certain services, at least in a transitional period. We don't know exactly what those numbers are. Rob can't know exactly what those numbers are. My concern, quite frankly, is that the city managers are saying, hey, we need really good numbers in case some of our residents challenge our 218 calculation. But they're asking for some things that are not in the realistic realm of possibility because they require immense amounts of speculation. And that's a little concerning to me. I understand where they're coming from, but Rob he doesn't have the answers as to what, how everything will work out and how we look at certain programs going forward, whether we were to say, okay, you know what, we don't have to have as extensive an education program as we do. We could potentially cut some costs there or something. Rob wasn't asked to dissect that kind of stuff. I know the city managers have talked in these resolutions about us, hiring a whole nother analyst to look at our cost structure. But, I feel like on the one hand, it's like, we can't answer questions of their satisfaction, for several more months. And that doesn't work when you're trying to determine a rate increase for the purposes of implementing 1383. So I feel like in some ways the IWMA is being put in a box and expected to have perfect answers about unknowable things before we proceed forward on the one thing we do know, which is we have costs to implement 1383. So anyway, I see Robert.
Well, if I could address that, I think that we can come up with data that is justifiable. And there are a lot of things that need to be, that are uncertain that can't be answered at this time. But I think we can separate those things out from the things that we can um, uh, arrive at really pretty precise numbers on, and the jurisdictions need that. So I think we should focus on what we can do rather than what we can't do. And you know, if we have to, I mean, it's always possible to reduce rates in the future. If we decide that we want to do that, we need to do a deep dive on the budget, but we can't do that between now and January 1st. So we need to get the rate increases. It's absolutely obvious, especially from looking at Barbara's report. We must raise rates, okay? And let's do it in a conservative manner. I don't mean politically conservative, I mean in a prudent manner. And see if we really do need that 4.5%. Also looking at the basis for the fee increase that's related to the hauler gross receipts. We need to look at that. And we need to be absolutely sure, to the extent possible, that we have verifiable data and move forward and then do the budget thing. We can't fold both of those operations into one project right now by January 1st. That's not possible. So let's look at what we can do.
Right, but because I feel like that we're being asked and pushed to somehow magically do both those things
Well,
first.
we'll just have to carry on, you know,
Yeah,
stay calm and carry on what Queen Elizabeth would have us do. So
right. So Rob, you had comments, and then Robert, I see you have your hand raised, but actually, Rob, did you have an immediate response to that, or should I let Robert ask question first and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, I just have a quick clarification. I agree with these comments, and I think that that's what's really essential about getting with the city managers and their finance directors to the extent that that's appropriate. In the discussions I've had, once I was able to have that conversation with them, they understood that there may need to be potential phasing. They understood that there were things that could be addressed in the short term and that there was an urgent need, and there were other things that might have to be looked at on a longer term basis. So I'm very confident that once we can get with that city managers group, we can meet everybody's needs and get a good understanding of what is out there. I will say, you know, we have no objection to looking at the existing budget, but I think, as you said, that's not something that you're going to get a good product out of if you try and hurry it over the next 30 days. It's something that's, you know, a 60 or 90-day assessment with some board engagement and then revisiting, you know, what the solutions are back with the board. And I would advise you to take the time on that, because you've got long-running programs that the community knows, and there's probably some policy discussion, not just math, behind some of those things. So, but I am confident that we could get with the city managers, work through the concerns that they have on the math and on the process related stuff, and get a good product back for that December meeting.
do
Hey,
you need
Robert.
our authorization for that, or is this enough direction?
I think all I need is the group of city managers and a date to meet. So yeah, we're good to go. We've got the budget, we've got the scope.
Okay.
And
And
I
then-
want to get
And
back
then
on
also,
that, but I
oh,
wanna-
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, I wanted to get back on that as well, but I see Robert has had his hand raised. Patty, did you have a quick comment on that?
Just a quick comment too, we need to include the special districts, right, in that meeting with the city managers. And
Yeah.
Okay, Robert.
Okay, I'm just following up in general here. As Rob said, I agree with the comments that were made. And I think Rob has elaborated enough and if we include the CSD managers as well, thank you, Jan. I think that's a group, the group that with Rob. And my question was how to move forward. I think somebody just brought that up. I believe we'd have to take this to the board meeting or not. Rob says he has budget time to do this. And one of the things I wanted to say, I'd like to have Rob lead this if that's acceptable. He's working with other agencies throughout the state. I'm sure he knows which ones are being successful at this, which ones are stumbling for whatever reason. And Rob, I'm maybe need to ask you, there was a thing in this law that said we could ask for an extension. Will we need to be able to, will we need to do that? And then I want to come back for one more comment.
I suspect that almost every agency in the state will be sending in a letter in March saying, we're really close, but there's these couple of things that we haven't yet done for 1383. I think you'll be closer than most, but I suspect you may have one or two items in there that you say, look, we need a little bit more time to get these things dialed in. And, you know, they may have to do with some of the actions that the cities and the CSDs need to take on procurement and Cal Green and those sorts of things. So I suspect there will be some, in the state's framing up that process for us now.
Okay, thank you, Rob. The other is that I'd like to see if we could get Charles to be the IWMA connection for that group. Charles, you're an elected official. All these people are responding to the political side of this, I think. And I'd like to have Charles, if he could, be a part of that group and go from there.
I mean, if Rob's, meeting with the city managers and the CSD general managers, I'd be happy to be there. But I think it's most important that you, Rob, do get together with them. My concern on this is timing. We wanted the report by a certain date in order to help meet a deadline from the city of SLO for their 218 process. And then, obviously it was a few days late, and then, we were looking, it was draft, we're looking for comments back. Concern is, and we as a body, in going through this, we made a decision to drop increase in the tipping fee. We went back to Rob and said, hey, recalculate this stuff. We're gonna need a new rate increase number. He's provided that in draft form. I think the report, I think the data's there. I do think like I said, some of it needs to be reworded almost more than, and you can call it repackaging or whatever, but I think it's more about rewording and explaining things so the layman can follow it a little better. But point being, we, in this process, we still have to adopt a new rate resolution with a new rate, whether that's 4.5, 4.25, 4, whatever we feel comfortable with. And Jan did mention a key point for future reference for people though, and that is you can adopt a rate increase, and for those agencies who need to run it through a 218, do so. You can always decrease it after that without running it through a 218 process. But if you do 4, and you decide later that it should have been 4.5, well, you got to start all over again. But if you go 4.25 and later you decide it could be 4, you just lower it. You can just lower it. And so you got to be careful what you do. I mean, I didn't like, frankly, the 4.5 number when it came out in the draft report. It was higher than I thought. And I certainly had submitted some questions. I'm sure you got them. And I would hope that, maybe in some way we could get it down. But bottom line, whatever that number becomes, we as a body still have to adopt a rate resolution. And we're not talking about, okay, we're gonna meet with city managers, which is great. And then at some point, this body's got to adopt a rate resolution that is then referred to the haulers, who is technically who we're imposing it on, if I understand correctly. And we've already decided that, okay, well, obviously we couldn't do October 1st. We're going to do January, looking at January 1st. We still got to watch this calendar a little bit, and that's a potential issue as well, as to when are we imposing this fee on the haulers, and then the jurisdictions with their 218 process, and whether or not we impose it on the haulers have to go to this jurisdiction and say, hey, we got to get our money back. So timing becomes an issue here too, or is always an issue. So time is of the essence, I guess, is what I'm saying. Jan.
No, I agree. I just briefly want to say that if the newly constituted board after November 15th, if we need to have an extra meeting, a special meeting to get the rates in place, I'd be all in favor of it. Getting it, this is I'm not
Absolutely.
going to call it an emergency, but it's really time sensitive. I agree with you completely. And we may just have to be a little less bureaucratic and a little more resilient and flexible and all that. And have a special meeting, get it done. I want to get it done and move on.
You're absolutely correct. I think, and I probably should have said that the inference being we may need to have a special meeting in order to enact a rate resolution on a timely basis. Because we even talked about that at our last meeting as a possibility. Robert.
Okay, just briefly, I just wanted to check that we as the executive committee are we directing HF&H? Are we telling Patty to do that? Or does this need to go to the board? And I guess I'll refer that to Jeff Minnery.
Yeah, money's in the budget for them to do it.
Yes, your board has authority to direct HF&H to complete the work. It's within the scope, it's budgeted, it's implementation of board policy.
Okay, you said board, but I'm saying we're the executive
Sorry,
committee, not the board.
sorry, your executive committee has the authority to direct Rob Hill.
All right, thank you. And then I think we should do that. I don't know if we need a motion, Charles. I don't know if we can make a motion on this because it just says discussion.
Yeah, I don't know that we need.
You don't
I
need a
mean,
motion.
Yeah, because we already tasked Rob to, revise his rate setting report. And this is part of that process in the sense that in order to clarify it, whatever, he needs to have a meeting with the city managers.
Okay, and
Bob?
Rob understands that we're going to put your face in front of this, Charles?
Well, I'll be there with him. I more than willing to be there with him. But Rob, did you have a comment or did somebody cause a concern there to you?
I just have, there's two issues that I want to make sure to raise to this group's attention because I think they're policy level things that the staff is going to have to wrestle with in working with this. One is that there's been a lot of discussion about the reserve level that was used in the plan. And we used a very conservative reserve level because you don't have a board reserve policy in place. And so one of the products that I expect the city managers will want is some board policy or some policy that goes along with this funding document that would identify the amount of an appropriate reserve. I've seen numbers from them anywhere from 10% to 30% that they're looking for rather than the 50% that we put in there. But typically something like a reserve policy is adopted by a board. You don't yet have one. And so we're sort of working with that. The other matter that is a little bit complicated and will require some close working together and maybe some direction, and this is where having Charles around to bounce things off of would be good. There's a big debate about whether to anticipate the rate adjustments that the haulers will have into the fee amount, because obviously there's this chicken and the egg that whatever the haulers increase their fees by, then this fee gets sort of an automatic adjustment on it. But different communities will have different fee adjustment levels, which will produce different revenues. And so we'll get into some equity issues as we have that conversation. It is my understanding that the fee percentage that we adopt will be the same percentage for all users throughout the IWMA, and that there isn't intended to be one fee for Atascadero and a different fee for SLO and a different fee for Arroyo Grande, that it's the same percentage. So those are two sort of bigger picture policy level things that are likely to come up in these discussions, and different jurisdictions may have different feelings about them. So I'm going to need some help. And Charles, I'm looking at your box there.
Well,
probably be on the phone with you saying, how do we split the baby between these things sometimes?
Well, I think those are both two good points, but I don't really see the equity issue. I mean, if jurisdiction A raises their rates 10% to accommodate 1383 requirements, that they're imposing on the haulers and the customers. And jurisdiction B, only raises the rate 5%, and jurisdiction C raises it 15%. How they set their rates, and what they determine is a reasonable cost for service, that's up to them. Our fee is, based on a percentage of that, and that's, I believe, if they're spending more money to comply with 1383, us charging the same percentage all around is a reflection of that. So I don't understand. I don't see an equity argument that would, and plus it would be just hugely complicated, I think, for us to ever try to discern different rates for different jurisdictions. Then you'd really have an equity argument. So I don't really see what that equity argument is. I do think it is an important issue to know in terms of setting our rate is, you're looking at existing revenue, gross revenue. You need to raise so much money to pay for our additional costs. But if every jurisdiction around the country or county on average is raising their rates, let's say 10%, well, we're automatically going to, whatever rate we set is going to generate 10% more revenue. And that should go into the calculation, which would allow us to decrease the rate a little bit.
Yeah, and that's where working closely with them to understand what they're hearing from the hauler and what that amount is. We sort of need those things going back and forth to get the overall package right. So
Right. And one last comment regarding something that Robert alluded to, with 619 passing, jurisdictions are likely to be saying in March, hey, we're doing our best, but a couple things we don't have done. We need some extra time. Our costs of implementing 1383 are largely staff-based costs. And those are in place. Well, they're not in place because we've got staff turmoil because of everything going on. But we're hiring additional staff to do 1383. And whether they're 100% accomplished or not, that in and of itself doesn't affect our costs. Okay, so Rob's going to meet with city managers and CSDGMs to clarify and try to address the concerns that they have. Work on rewriting a report. I can attend those meetings with him. Do we have anything else? And then we will have to have a special meeting at some point in time of the full board regarding whatever rate we end up landing on. Do we have any other comments on this issue? And then we'll see if we have public comment.
I just would like to say that I think that staff should work with Rob and, to just coordinate dates and make sure that all the communication is happening to everybody who needs to come. So that Rob isn't in a position where it's like, oh, wait a second, what is this send me and CSD guys email, so.
Oh,
Okay.
right. Staff needs to help Rob
Yes.
coordinate those things. And I think one of the things, we learned through all this is we've always got to keep there's a lot of communication that has to go on because in the absence of communication, we get assumptions, and assumptions are dangerous, confusing, and lead to, they lead to bad communication. So, gotcha. Okay. All right. Is that clear with everybody? Let's see if we have any public comment on this issue.
Before we go to public comment, I have one more thing. I just wanted to make sure that I understood it correctly. We talked about a board reserve policy or an IWMA reserve policy. I can take and have that prepared with the percentage open, right? Open for discussion. We can decide on that percentage, but I can bring that policy forward to the executive committee and the board. Did you want that ready in November, December?
I'm not, I think excellent point, Patty. I was going to say, why not, November, but that's prior to meeting with the city managers. And I think maybe we might have some discussion here. And I would be curious either from you or from Rob, what is I think Rob, in your report, you kind of indicated the 50 in the absence of a specific policy is more of an industry norm, but what do you see around the state?
You would typically do a 50% in a conservative policy that was based on periodic revenues. So if you were getting parcel tax revenue, for example, and you were getting it in slugs through the year, For agencies like yours that don't own lots of heavy equipment, aren't operating big facilities, things like that, something in the 20% range may be adequate. And again, your revenue streams are pretty consistent. You're getting these fee payments from the haulers frequently enough that you don't have to worry about those big tranches. Something in the 20 or 25% range may be appropriate. But it's important to understand that there's also a fair bit of uncertainty around SB 1383 right now. And so it might almost be better to have a larger, maybe 30% contingency now that you burn down to something like 20 or 25% once you got a comfort level with it. But to be honest with you, I've seen them anywhere from 10% up to 50%. And it really has a lot to do with the context and how much money folks have to set aside.
I feel like we need to set that policy before we set our rate because it drives the dollar figure, which would mean sooner.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we told Patty, bring a resolution, leave it blank, but we have in mind 25% or something. I'm not sure if you'll be meeting with the city managers prior to the full board meeting to where we explain that 25% or 30% is a realistic number. They might go, that sounds a lot better, or they might press and say, well, I only need 20 or something. So I'm wondering from Jan and Robert, should we put it on the agenda with a blank? Put it on the full board agenda with a blank?
I would suggest that we put it on the agenda of the first special meeting that we have, which could even be November 17th.
Okay.
It won't be the 24th because Thanksgiving, but I think it should be on the first, on the agenda of the first special meeting that we have as a reduced policy board after the county is left.
Okay.
We definitely have to, and hopefully that will be good data, good information for the city managers when they meet, whenever that is, hopefully also before Thanksgiving. So, but not on the 10th.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Robert?
Okay, yeah, that's fine with me. And I just had one other suggestion. Under the circumstances and with all the stuff that's going on, it might be prudent to work with a smaller number first, a smaller percentage, and then plan on building that over the, and as time goes on, so that we're not straddling the agency and the rates and getting everybody upset at the very beginning.
Okay, understood. And yeah, Jen, I think you remind me of a good point I keep forgetting, which is, we should do some of these things after November 15th, and we'd be having to have a special meeting regarding rate setting anyway, so we could, as long as we allow Rob to make certain assumptions regarding the reserve in determining the rate, we can do that in a special meeting. So yeah, I agree with you. We'll not put it on, for Patty's purposes, not put it on the full board agenda next or on November 10th or whatever. It'll end up on a special meeting agenda.
President Barbeau, if I might make a quick comment.
Yes, please.
While your committee was discussing this, I just pulled up a reserve policy study that was done for the West Contra Costa Integrated Waste Management Authority that I will forward to Patty, that might give some guidance as to things to look at and how the analysis is done. Rob's smiling.
They own facilities, and so their context is quite a bit different than yours is. But I agree, there's lots of those reserve studies out there that we can look at from JPAs that are similar to yours. And in fact, I was just thinking Central Contra Costa is another good example, and they do have a reserve policy study that they did that I could take a look at.
Great.
Again, don't own facilities, just have staff run programs.
Right, because yeah, it's very different if you own landfills or if you own, major capital intensive sites and have tons of staff and all that. So, okay, I think, let's see if we have public comment on this issue. It's on item 10.
At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I have nobody for public comment.
All right, thank you. we will move on to item 11.
Now, on item 11, it kind of really, we ran over and probably already had the majority of this discussion when it comes to budget and anticipated revenue shortfalls. I don't know if we need to add any more at this time. We've gotten new direction again with Rob meeting with the the special districts and the city managers, this rate policy. I think unless anybody has any other comments on this section, I think we're good to go.
I have no comment.
Neither. Jan, do you have any comments? Or did we lose Jan?
It looks like we did.
Let me see.
No, she's still here.
I see her as a participant still. Jan, are you there?
I think he's
Yeah.
muted.
I just
Okay.
forgot to unmute, sorry. No, I think we have pretty much covered it.
Okay.
And I think also by speeding up the time frame, you know, we're going to do a service for everybody. I would like to have us, if we could, at some point in the meeting, figure out a special meeting date and put that on the November 10th agenda so that everybody can schedule.
Okay. So
But I
put
agree
it-
with Patty.
Mhm.
So put an item on the November 10th agenda to schedule a special meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. Makes sense. Okay, so we need to see if we have any public comment on item 11.
This time, if a member of the public has a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press star 9. I have no one for public comment.
Okay, we move on to item number 12.
Okay, again, this is item number 12, and it's about developing a process to make changes to the joint powers. We've kind of had discussions throughout this meeting on this about the ad hoc and et cetera. How are we going to go forward? Again, in the last meeting, I personally thought we made great progress. We removed on the documents, we removed the county Board of Supervisors as members. We removed the provision to have the quorum. We removed the county as the designated agency, replaced it with the placeholder of the City of SLO. Thank you very much, City of SLO. And we removed the supermajority. Now, that being said, I still had members, staff members from the cities and special districts, not all of them, some of them, reach out and say that we missed something, and we missed something very big in their opinion, which was that final provision, which was, limiting the IWMA's ability to adopt, impose, implement any rule, regulation, policy, or ordinance. And this is all written down on page 66. So I'd like to open this up for discussion from the executive or for the executive committee members to see what their perspective is on this and get direction.
Well, I think if we could start though, that, we, in our last full board meeting, we talked about the necessity of making these immediate changes in the JPA in order to, function without the county involvement, direct involvement. And we said we would form a committee in November to look at other amendments to the JPA. And some of these resolutions from the cities have said, we'd like you to do A, B, C, and D. Well, we pretty much already did A, B, and C. D being the one you mentioned. And then there might be other issues that come about from reforming the JPA with just the cities and CSDs. For me, the big issue here is, that we be able to form the committee at our November full board meeting. And I don't want to end up having a big, long discussion and then we go off, we're waiting on cities to nominate somebody or something like that. So my concern today is that we address how at the full board meeting, we're going to reach a conclusion of having a formed committee that can then set its own meeting date, get together. So Jan, I think you were first. Oh,
Yeah, Thank you. Again, I think this should be something we bring up at the special meeting after the county has left. But I'm I have the understanding that Mr. Minery has done an analysis of the resolutions that have been passed.
Yes,
And
I
I
have.
think, yeah, if you can tell us, was there a clear majority that wanted to limit or work to state mandates only?
Yes, of the resolutions that we've been provided, there is consistency from specifically identified Grover Beach, Pismo, Paso Robles, and the city of San Luis Obispo had almost identical requests. Revisions to the JPA in common to all of those agencies was to remove the supervisors from the JPA, which your board has already recommended, removal of the supermajority provision, and a provision to limit the IWMA's authority to state mandates. Then those are specific to the JPA. In common with all three agencies as well, they had essentially requested action plans, which were to number one, recruit executive director, two, have a third-party consultant analyze costs, fees, rates, staffing, programs, the IWMA, the agency as a whole. And also one of the agencies, Pismo Beach, is looking for a more concise and clear rate study, which I think your board has already discussed earlier today. But that is pretty much it. Morro Bay, their resolution was much more sparse and is simply just an affirmation of the intent to continue with the IWMA.
Yeah.
So many of the issues your board has already discussed here today. It's just how you're approaching it, which I think in almost an organic sense today, you've been addressing each of these issues as raised by the city jurisdictions.
So do you think that, I mean, this is a question for Robert and, and Charles. Do you think this is something that could be handled when the supervisors are still on the board? Or is this something that we need to discuss once it's just the urban jurisdictions?
I'm going to defer to Robert first, and then I do have a comment on that.
Jan, you said something earlier about putting this on the special meeting so that the supervisors are gone. Back in August of 2020, I wrote a several page paper about my experience on the board, and one of them was to limit the number of supervisors so they don't have a majority on our board. And it looks like they took care of that for us. And I made some other recommendations, and I think maybe go back and have a look at that letter and see if any of those things are applicable. But Jeff, good report. Thank you. I took my hand down as you were speaking. So I think we wait till the supervisors are gone, then get to work.
Okay. My comment would be, I mean, I appreciate what both Jan and Robert have said here, but you know, we've talked about having a special meeting for purposes of the rate resolution, you know, and issues around that. I can understand the desire perhaps to wait till after November 15th, but on the other hand, we've gotten some criticism here, I think unfair criticism, inaccurate or unfounded criticism for that we didn't include this one particular provision in the immediate JPA amendment. I think if we don't address forming this committee at our full board meeting at the soonest opportunity, that is November 10th, I think we just feed that. And I think the county, the Board of Supervisors, you know, sitting on our board, they have not interrupted any considerations or anything. And the formation of this committee doesn't have anything to do with the county So I don't expect that they would have any comment and that their presence would in any way detract from or particularly add to the conversation. So I'm not reluctant to have the conversation with them present. I don't think it would affect it. I think in this case, timeliness is more of the essence that
Mhm.
that we, I tried to explain last meeting, I think, to those skeptical people that, hey, we've got to do these amendments right now. We need them in place by November 15th in theory to function. Your own resolutions say, please look at these other things within 6 months. Forming a committee in November, it could come back as soon as December. That's almost light speed in government speak. But
Mm.
all this being said, I don't really want to wait till a special meeting just because that's when the county will be gone. I think we need to address it, form the committee, let the committee, then do its thing, and come back with changes. Because there will be, I think, in the course of this conversation at the committee level, there will be other issues that arise. Whether it's about CSD representation, or you see Pismo Beach suggested that future withdrawals have a 6-month time frame instead of a 30-day time frame. There might be other governance things that come up in these discussions, but I want to get the ball rolling. And as I said, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of forming the committee. Robert, you have your hand raised.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
I
think
did too.
at the last meeting, I think we agreed to have that committee. It's my understanding that the board president would appoint the committee. And I think you can do that anytime you want, Charles.
Interesting point.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was part of it, but be careful what you give me, I guess. Jan.
Just say that I'm I'm vacillating a little bit here. Could we possibly on November 10th have a vote on whether, we're going to amend the JPA on November 10th, okay? Could we have a vote of whether or not people wanted to also take action on the state mandates only edition? If it turned out that we had a majority of people or board members representing the urban jurisdictions who wanted to put the state mandates only in there now, we could do it. In other words, the decision would be, should this be something we handle today, the 10th, or is this something that we should put off and refer to the committee that's been appointed by?
I'm confused by your statement that we're going to be amending the JPA on November 10th. We as a body already approved JPA amendment to and referred it to the cities for ratification, which we're waiting for.
Right, right.
So we don't have on the agenda to amend the JPA. We have on the agenda to create a committee to further amend the JPA.
Right. No, you're right. It's now going to the cities. And I guess the question is whether it would strengthen the future IWMA if we handled the state mandates only item on the 10th rather
I
than
think
postponing it.
we could discuss it as an item that, this is the number one thing that may need to happen, that the committee needs to include in its amendments.
Okay.
But I don't think you want to have a situation where we have the amendments from last month and then we have this one amendment, and then we're going to have a committee with
Okay.
possible more amendments.
All right.
Patty, you've had your hand raised a couple times. Before I go back to Robert, did you have a comment?
And this is more like on the nuts and bolts of it, and forgive me if it's too far of a topic jump here, but I do have several volunteers who are willing to be on this ad hoc committee. I have Whitney, City Manager of Rio Grande, Rochelle, City Manager at Atascadero. If I remember correctly, John Hammond and or staff wanted to be a part of it. And then of course, Jordan from the City of SLO, and if I remember correctly, too, Ms. Marks was interested in it. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I have a lot of people willing and able, stepping up to the plate. And also Jeff from Templeton CSD, which is great, expressed interest. And I don't have anything concrete here, but those are at least a start.
Okay.
Well,
Robert,
I have just a concern. We've got the city managers and CSDs meeting with Rob. Then we have this ad hoc committee. Then we have the technical committee, the task force that's in our JPA. It seems to me that, is it possible that the task force, the LTF, local task force, could be the ad hoc committee? I mean, do we have to have 3 committees at this point? Could we just have one?
I would say to that, and I'm going to get you to your Robert though, but I would comment on that quickly that those committees are larger. We have to think about how practically speaking we want the size of this. The LTF is great. It's got a member from every jurisdiction, except it's got, but doesn't have any, any IWA board members on it. It doesn't have any, they're all staff so they can get guidance from the city manager, but I'm just saying we don't need to drag all of them into it. I think we need to have some of them represented. But Robert, what did you have a comment? And then I have a
Yeah,
thought.
just Jan was talking about the state mandates only, and I believe that's in our strategic plan. It's been voted on by the board. I don't think there's any question about state mandates only unless you're trying to remove that statement.
No, I think the key thing is the fact that it's in our strategic plan isn't solid enough for some folks. It's not comforting enough in terms of what the intent is or what a future board might do, down the road. So therefore, they're wanting to see it in the base document of the organization. And so I totally get that. I think the idea that, we've talked about it, we put it in the strategic plan, we're forming a committee to do these amendments. The idea that we're suddenly going to sneakily drop that provision out of the main JPA amendment is just, it's, to me, it's cynical conspiratorial thinking. I mean,
Okay,
come on,
thank
folks.
you, thank
We're
you.
not gonna, that's the first amendment that's going to be on the table in this committee meets.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
So my thoughts on the committee is, A, you don't want it too big. At least I don't think you do. In other words, you don't want 13, 15 people. You can only have up to 4 sitting IWMA board members on it, or it becomes a whole Brown Act thing of, it's going to be a public meeting and all kinds of notifications, and we're going to limit the communications, et cetera. So we have, I think, 4 potential board members that want to sit on it. Robert wanted to sit on it as the CSD guy. That makes sense to me. John Hammond explicitly did want to sit on it. Jan said she would sit on it, would be willing to sit on it. If you had that makeup, somebody's going to say, what about a South County person? I certainly wouldn't mind sitting on it, but may have to defer if you want a better balance. But so you got to have 4 IWMA board members. I think we need at least 1 city manager. I think we need another CSD manager, a CSD manager would be good. 1 or 2 members of the LTF would be good. I wouldn't want to have more than 9. This is just me talking out loud. Wouldn't want to have more than 9 unless you guys think it's a great idea. My thought is not necessarily, I'm a little concerned, not concerned, but a little reticent about having an elected board member and a staff member from the same city. I know John Hammond had mentioned they got a great public work person who's on the LTF. And again, we've got a staff member from SLO that definitely wants to be on it. When that Derek Johnson, the city manager, wants that staff member to be on it.
Oh, yeah, well, I would defer to Jordan Lane. She's got a lot of education and experience in this field, way more than I do. So I would be willing to have her rather than myself. And I'd recommend Keith Storton from South County. I think he's really good and has a very balanced approach.
And I could see in my city having Laura Christensen, who's our LTF member, on rather than myself, and or our city manager on it, but not both. Like I said, we could have multiple people from single cities, but we could have a 15-member committee doing this. And I'm not saying that's an absolute no, if everybody else thinks having a 15-member committee is a good idea, I just kind of think that it doesn't need to be that big. Whoever's the city manager can get input from the other city managers. Whoever's the LTF member can get input from their city manager or their elected. Any of us as board members who aren't on the committee can provide input to whoever, to not another non-board member, I guess. So Robert, you have a comment? I'm going to defer to Jeff. If he has any comments on this.
I would just say, keep the committee to look at it quite small. I would suggest you get 3 people, get them together, make the changes that you think are appropriate. I think we can find 3 people that are involved enough to do that. Have it reviewed by Jeff so that we know that we haven't said something that's not going to pass the legal test. And then every city and every CSC is going to have to take a look at it anyway. And then you send it out and ask for, in draft and ask for feedback. And then you come back in your small committee and evaluate those feedback items and see what you can do with it. Otherwise, if it gets too big, you'll never get it done. Thank you.
Okay, I just had a different thought, but Jeff, do you have any comments on this?
No, I believe I had said this before. When I looked back at the historic documents about how this was done originally, it appears to be a smaller group, probably 5 of a committee that got together, put together the first JPA. And I could tell by the correspondence at that time that there was a kind of a push at the end where they just said, this is as good as we're going to get. They get sent it out. And I think you may end up it's hard to believe that you're going to get everybody happy with every little tweak and revision they want. But there is a certain time element that you're going to want a new JPA quickly. So
yeah.
Okay. I did gravitate towards Mr. Enz's idea of the president making selections.
Okay. Jan, what did your comment?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that I think 5 sounds like a good number. And also, I think if we could make sure that various groups have a chance to have input and give input to these 5 people, the groups being the local task force and perhaps the haulers and, the various entities, so that when these 5 people are looking at possible amendments, they have got a wealth of information and input from these various other groups, but they're going to be the ones making the decision. And I think, Charles, you should just go ahead and appoint them.
Okay, now you guys are giving me a bit of an epiphany on this. What if we just had a committee? Yes, what if we just had the president appoint a committee, possibly including himself, but with up to 4 board members, but we have the committee not as a formal public meeting, but we invite any city manager that wants to attend, any LTF member that wants to attend, any CSG general manager wants to attend, and they can provide comment and input, but our committee is really just 4 board members.
That works for me, Charles.
And
I leave it up to your discretion, Charles.
Okay. All right.
What you think would work. I mean, really, what we want is a bunch of clear thinking, well-meaning and efficient people who aren't going to get in each other's hair and are going to be able to present something relatively quickly for the entire board membership.
Gotcha. Okay, Jeff.
President Barbeau, I'd like to make a quick suggestion that perhaps as a starting place, we look at the original JPA, make additional amendments that reflect comments received by the member agencies, and provide for the first ad hoc committee meeting a starting draft with certain kind of softball changes that we know are coming. That way everyone can see that you're moving forward right out of the gate in the direction the cities are requesting.
Right, I think we can incorporate some language in that in the appointment. Patty, when do you need, as far as putting this item on the November 10th agenda, discussion or appointment of committee members or whatever. Because then we could write a quick staff report that says the executive committee suggestion is that the president appoint a committee, that includes up to 4 board members. That will, we'd write a little staff report about it. When do you need that by?
I can do it instantly. And we'll just plug it in. I'm listening to what you guys are saying right now. And the backup softball document, so to speak, we can get that, work with Jeff Minery to get that. We can incorporate those changes that we know are bristling points that people want to really get in. And I know that I can work with Mr. Minery to make this happen fast.
Okay. 'Cause
But
then,
Charles, I'm not sure we need to ask the board for authorization to do that. I think under the JPA, the
You can-
executive committee is already authorized. As I recall,
Mhm.
you don't have to ask the board to authorize something that's already authorized in the JPA, right?
Understand. I think that
It
though,
would
from
be
the
more,
last meeting,
I think it'd be more reporting.
yeah,
But
well,
under the JPA, I'm authorized to do this. I've done it and here it is.
yeah,
And
I
then feedback.
understand. I'm thinking though that at the last meeting, we kind of implied that we would create the committee at the next board meeting. So I would like to bring
Oh,
it forward
okay.
as this is the executive committee recommendation that the president of the board do this. And then I could explain, who I want to appoint, why, and how, how we would meet, what we would do, including the first and most critical item for change. And then just have it on there as discussion. And if anybody, if people are up in arms about that approach, we give the board a chance to complain
Okay.
about it, as opposed to saying, here's what I did, this is it, hope you like it.
Okay, all right. I give up.
And then we do
Okay.
have,
Patty?
and then we do have an item 16 on the yet to be approved draft agenda for the board that does talk about ad hoc committee. So it's there, we can plug in, I can work with Mr. Minery and yeah.
Okay, and I might give you some verbiage on that, and that's why I was wondering when you would need to finish that, because you would post
Oh.
post the agenda next,
1 week out,
okay, to next Wednesday, got it.
sorry.
Okay, all right. I think we'll go to public comment this, because I think we've beat this to death a little bit. So let's see if we have any public comment input on this item.
This time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I have no public comment.
All right, thank you. Okay, so you guys will prepare, it's agenda item 16 on the full board agenda. You guys will write up a report. I'd like to review it, maybe give some input in that, and that'll be the executive committee recommendations that the president appoint a board for a committee, appoint a committee.
And it would be
Okay.
subject to ratification by the full board.
Sure, exactly. Thank you. Okay, so we're ready to move on to item 13. Patty.
Item 13, Coal Canyon Processing Education Room. If you remember back in August of this year, we received a notice of termination that we needed to exit that room. In September, at that September board meeting following that, the board asked us to find a new home for the exhibits, which we have done. Thankfully, the Exploration Station in Grover Beach has said that they'll take all of the exhibits except for 2. And the 2 that they can't take is because they're vaulted up the ceiling. They just don't have the space to fit them in their little museum. So this is really good news. And we turned around and had a conversation with Mr. John Ryan out at Coal Canyon. He said he's absolutely fine with us leaving the 2 exhibits there that vault up the ceiling. They're totally applicable to the room anyways, which is the landfill, what stuff is pulled out of the landfill, and then the layers in a landfill. So he's not worried about those 2 exhibits staying. And then on top of that, he's agreed to purchase the projector that's embedded in that, the speakers and a screen. And so I wanted to turn this over to the executive committee for discussion and approval.
Pat, the only question I have is, given the small dollar amount, does this even need to go to the full board? Can we just approve this here?
I think we can just approve it here.
You can approve this.
I think that to me, the staff report was very clear, answered any questions I have, and good work on all the coordination, I think. Jan or Robert, you have any comments or questions?
No,
the
I
project-
think that makes sense.
The projector and the screen, what are we gonna do with that?
We're actually selling them to John Bryant. The projector
Okay.
is 6 years old and the screen and speakers are about 10 years old.
Okay, then I would move approval.
Okay, so we need a motion then? I mean, we need to go to see if there's any public comment real quick.
Thank you.
We'll need an actual motion to approve staff's recommendation.
I'll wait
Is that
for
right?
public comment.
Okay, let's do public comment first.
At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I have no public comment.
Okay, great. Then we'll take a motion on approving, approving staff's recommendation.
So moved.
Okay, second,
Okay, we have a motion by Marks, a second by Ends. Please read the roll call.
Mr. Verboe,
Yes.
Ms. Marks,
Yes.
and Mr. Enns.
yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we'll move on to item 14, recruitment of new executive director.
Yes, this is another step moving forward. And again, I don't need to remind anyone on this or in this virtual forum that Brooks did exit back in June. We've had an interim director who exited unexpectedly. During the September board meeting, the board gave me direction to be interim executive director until January till we get this position filled. So in order to meet that deadline, as well as to meet our member jurisdictions request that we do fill this executive director position as soon as possible, we have before you today, number one, a job description for the executive director, and number two, staff took the liberty of reaching out to multiple organizations for pricing for an executive search firm. So I'd like you to take a look at those and provide staff with direction.
Patty, you might have I have a couple of questions. First one though is, in terms of the position description, is it differ in any way from the position description, that we had previously for Brooks, other than
Much different.
deleting the county? Okay, much different. What are the key differences?
Key differences has to do with trying to meet member agencies' wants and needs when it comes to really state mandated programs, expanding the job description to be more in tune with member agencies instead of being an isolated island, right? And then also it is asking, not requiring, but asking for more in-depth knowledge when it comes to solid waste issues and matters. When you peruse through it, if you get to like the licensing and certifications, what we're really looking for is somebody who really understands municipal solid waste, landfill, composting operations. Also the Cal Green regulations, which is so much a part of SB 1383. And again, urban planning, community planning, a lot of this job description has been expanded to encompass things like you will be working with multiple stakeholders and sometimes contentious stakeholders. And we're looking for somebody who could really bring the parties together. So yes, it is expanded.
Okay, and then you, somewhere in here, I thought we made mention, because I read it, but I didn't compare it to the previous one. Somewhere in here, I thought you made mention that this used to be, that the place you recommended, Latrell Staffing Group, used to be San Luis Person. Yeah, my concern about that was, and you mentioned here in your oral comments that you kind of looked at a number. My concern is I'm not aware that San Luis Personnel Services has a lot of experience in governmental positions, and I know that there are many firms that do. Some come to my mind, and then I know Jan's probably aware of some as well, that routinely do governmental agency type employment service searches. And so my concern was whether you looked at some of those when I term the San Luis Personnel Services, I think of them as more private sector-y. if
You're
you
right.
will. So.
You're
anyway,
right.
those
You're
are-
right.
So.
So
okay.
last time, I'm sorry to interrupt. Last time, San Luis Personnel Services is who we used last time.
Mhm.
And again, your point's well taken. I'd be happy to go out and even look further, right? We are not locked into any of these. It was just a selection brought forward. Himmel
Okay.
is absolutely stellar at what they do when it comes to the solid waste industry. But I can also look for, if the board or executive committee would like, entities that really specialize in hiring government employees as well.
Right. Jeff, you have your hand raised, and then I'm gonna see what Jan and Robert have to say.
Thank you, President Barrow and directors. My question on this is that I don't believe this, the cost of a recruiter is a budgeted item. And I don't recall the full board granting authority to enter into a contract for recruitment.
That is correct.
So my suggestion would be that to the extent your committee's going to suggest entering into a contract with the recruiter, I bring it to the whole board. Also, this is just a reminder to the committee that based on the resolutions recently passed by your member agencies, all very keenly interested in the recruitment and hiring of an executive director, there may be a value to bringing this to the full board to with the job description and everything for your member agencies consideration.
No, yeah, it was my intent that we would bring this to the full board, but what I'm looking at here is perhaps, and depending what Robert and Jan have to say, that we ask Patty to, reach out to some of these other agents, employment agencies that focus on executive searches in the governmental sector and bring that. But yeah, you're right. This needs to come before the full board.
I raised my hand before Patty spoke.
Okay. All right. Jan or Robert? Jan.
Yeah, I think of San Luis Personnel as mostly like a temp agency. I think we need a headhunter who is, if not, who's got expertise in governmental, and often they will have expertise in a certain department. So we might be looking for someone who's got public works or utilities, like in San Luis Obispo. This solid waste is under our utilities. It's not in our public works. So we need a headhunter. I did have one minor addition on page 85 when we're talking about the knowledge, skills, and abilities. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth bullet in the middle of the page says outstanding skills and abilities to establish and maintain professional and effective working relationships. I just would want to add the word communication. So be outstanding communication skills and abilities. Because I think that was something, with all due respect, I think with our last full-time executive director, he never spoke to me, at all for 6 months that I was on the board. And, I kept trying to make contact. It didn't work. So I think we need to have someone who's really good at communication. It's so important.
I will add that. Thank you.
Robert.
Okay.
I think Jeff's suggestion is right on. It's a contract. It's not budgeted. We have saved some money because we haven't hired an interim. We haven't hired a acting executive director. So I think there is some money there, but I think it's really would help the board tremendously to put it on the November 10th agenda.
Robert.
Well, November 10th, again, we have the supervisors to help us. And I'm not sure we want that, but I do agree to go to the full board and get their opinion. I'm having some concerns about how we get from here to March. The workload seems to have imploded with a number of things, and Rob Hilton spoke to some of those with the feedback we're getting from city managers. and there's a lot more homework to do there. And going back to something that you brought up, Charles, in a couple meetings, the concern about bringing someone in and into a train wreck and then trying to put their name on it. And I'll go, I think, Charles, you mentioned trying to find someone as an interim. And from what I'm experiencing here is that, and the feedback I'm getting is that we're not able to meet everyone's concerns. I think our issue with going to Rob as a small group, I forget what his term was, the subgroup, is excellent. But at this point, I think we should look for an interim that we would expect to be here for maybe not more than 4 or 5 months, while we really do a good job of finding the permanent guy. And while this may cost some money to get, and I'm thinking, someone that's highly qualified to come in and build confidence across the board, I think my recommendation is that we look for an interim and then go out for a permanent. And that was something, Charles, you tried to suggest to us some time ago, and I think you were right.
Well, interesting, because I feel like both myself and the board collectively have been back and forth on this matter of interim. No, let's don't do that. Let's go off for permanent. No, let's don't go off for permanent because there's too much turmoil. Let's maybe look at an interim. No, let's have Patty keep doing it for a while. Then we'll do something. I think we've been kind of back and forth, and I think I've been back and forth on this. What's changed now for me is that we have all these resolutions passed, by the cities, basically saying, we'd like to do A, B, C, and D, and one of them is they want us to go out as soon as possible on a permanent replacement, and so that impacts my thinking. And the other thing is, I think we should put it on the agenda. We should ask Patty to look at some of these other agencies as possibilities. And I, like, in my mind, I think of, there's some names come to mind, like second, and I can pass those on to Patty. And I know any city manager would know 5 of them off the top of their head. But the board, Robert, I think there's going to be ample discussion room at the November 10th meeting with the board, that if the full board for some reason, still doesn't, wants to hesitate, wants to wait, that's what we'll have that item on the agenda for November. I don't think we should delay putting it on the agenda, because putting it on the agenda kind of demonstrates our responsiveness to the concerns of our jurisdictions. Jan?
I agree. And I think in the job description, if we can make it clear that there's a 6-month probationary period, that's normal for governmental agencies. Then we would be hunting for a permanent director. I think it's actually, I'm going to imagine myself in the position of this imaginary candidate who's out there. The chance to reshape something, I wouldn't look at it as a train wreck. I'd say the train wreck has happened. And now we're, and we're in the process of doing the cleanup after the train wreck, but it's an opportunity for this person to shape a whole new agency. And for someone who's got their own vision and they're creative and go-getter, it would be a remarkable opportunity to put your own stamp on a new agency. I think we should go for an executive director, give ourselves an out, a permanent one, and give ourselves an out in case that person really doesn't work out, and that would, in effect, de facto effect, be an interim. So I just think we need to demonstrate that we're taking action. So I agree with Charles Bourbeau. So thank you.
Okay, so I think, well, let's go and see if we have any public comment on this, and then we'll come back and wrap it up. Let's go to the phones, as they say.
This time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I have no public comment.
Okay, all right, so coming back, I think, we'll be on, we'll have it on the November 10th agenda, discussing awarding a contract to a executive director headhunting firm to recruit a new executive director. And Patty, would like you to, go out and like I said, I can send you several, like 2 or 3 names that I know of. And like I said, any city manager would have 5 off the top of their head to at least reach out to with the idea that you'd come back with, if 1 or 2 of them would submit proposals, come back with them for the board to take action on, that would be great. So, and you can make the changes to the PD that Jan suggested, would be good as well.
Okay.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that, Charles.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Jan, you still have your hand raised. Is that a new hand or is that an old hand? Okay, it's an old hand. Okay, all righty. Let's move on to item 15.
15?
15, yes.
Okay, so this is a discussion regarding recognition of the exiting County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to open this up to this committee for comment and direction.
Okay, Jan, you're the one that had brought this item up for discussion. So do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, we have one member of the Board of Supervisors who's been on the IUMA board since 2007. And then we have one who's only been on for about 6 months. Traditionally, this organization has given certificates of recognition and thank you for your service to outgoing board members. I think it would be a nice gesture, especially for the people who've been on the board for a long time. I believe, at least except for Supervisor Ortiz-Legg, most of them have been on at least 4 years. And, so I think it would be, I would want this to be a gracious gesture of thank you for your service. And it's traditionally and typically done. So that's my thought.
Patty, could you enlighten us? I guess I haven't noticed it with board members. I've noticed though, when Jeff Lee left as the board president, he also left the board, and so did Aaron Gomez, and we gave him a little thing, something recycled, appropriately so. But I mean, I'm not aware when other board members have left, whether we've done anything or not done anything. I'm not recalling.
Throughout the history and beginning with Bill Royal, whenever a board member left, there was some sort of parting recognition and possibly even a small gift, like you mentioned, the plaque or the recycled wood with the burned engraved in it. Bill Royal's favorite was M&Ms with the board member's name on it. That being said, we'd be happy to do whatever this committee would like.
I mean, I would say this, I mean, for members of the public, these local elected officials, I mean, the county supervisors are a little different. They actually get paid some real money, I guess you'd call it. City council members, CSD board members, they get paid next to nothing to do what they do, sub minimum wage. And they probably get plenty of plaques and certificates and stuff like that. So I don't know that any of them are very concerned about whether they get a certificate from the IWMA or not. As Jan said, it's more of a nice gesture. For me, I mean, if I was leaving, some nice comments, would be nice. But, really don't need anything. But if our past thing has been to give a certificate of recognition or something for service, I certainly have no problem with that. I don't think you need a specific resolution specific to the supervisors since they all are leaving at one time, because that was by their choice as a body. But I mean, I certainly think we could make, nice comments to thank them for their past service. And, or if we have a standard certificate of appreciation or something that we send or hand out at somebody's last meeting. Problem being with some board members, you don't know it's their last meeting. An election happens and they get appointed to a different committee and you never see them again. Or they, or they're not reelected or what have you. So I don't know. I mean, I'm happy with if we have a standard certificate. I wouldn't do a special resolution, if you will. Circumstances are a little awkward there in this regard. But if we have a standard certificate of appreciation, or if we want to make verbal comments to say thank you for what you've done for the IWMA in the past, that sounds good. Because they've frankly, unlike us, where we're representing one of 5 members, they all have to show up to all of these meetings and they have tons of committees. So they certainly have invested time and effort in this organization. So I don't know, Robert, what do you think?
Well, my first impression on this was give them a rusty tin can, tell them not to let the door hit you when you walk. So the kinder side of me says that we can't go wrong by saying thank you, giving them something to remember that their service here, as you said, it takes a lot of time to go through a 200, 300 page packet and be prepared to come to a meeting. They've done a good job doing that. And the current issue, I think, is Jan just said that the train wreck's over. We're getting this thing back up on the track. So let's do something nice for them and thank them for the time and effort that they have put in.
Yeah. Could give them a certificate of divorce, I guess, instead of it.
Oh, come on. Let's be open to the possibility that some future Board of Supervisors may want to rejoin the IWMA. I mean, the whole existence of this organization was Harry Ovitt's vision back in 1995 or 1996, and then finally enacted 1997. It came from the Board of Supervisors. It's possible that sometime down the line, we may have a majority on the Board of Supervisors who wants to rejoin what we're doing and not duplicate services. So
And-
I'd like to,
And
I
that
mean,
kind of
maybe this is just Pollyanna of me, but I would like to, despite everything, have their last meeting have a positive note.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I sincerely want to, thank them sincerely for their past service on the IWMA. I saw a draft resolution that I was not at all comfortable with the wording, and I don't think they would be either. But I have no problem with us giving them certificate of appreciation and sincerely giving them some kind words and thanking them for their dedication in the past to representing the county on this board. And along the lines of what you just said, Jan, going back to the JPA amendment, the JPA should probably reflect an openness to the county being a member.
Well, they're eligible.
Exactly.
They're
And
eligible.
you want to maintain that, just like
Yes.
when this body was created, PASO did not join.
Right,
They were eligible,
but they were
and
eligible.
did not
Right.
require further amendment for them to join.
Mhm, mhm.
That's the point. So no, I totally understand where you're coming from on that and agree. But I think whatever our standard certificate of appreciation might be, if we have one, Patty, and then certainly some verbal comments. I don't know if it needs to be an agenda item.
Mhm.
It's fine with me if it is an agenda item. Say recognition of departing board members. Or we just do it as a last, do it under the normal, comments for the good of the cause.
So would you want to work with Patty for the language of the, you were talking about a single certificate of appreciation that would be for the entire board rather than individual ones? And would you be willing to work with her and the wording that you feel comfortable with?
Well, I mean, I was thinking it would be individual certificates of appreciation.
Individual, that's fine too. I mean, that
individual-
was, yeah, I think I would prefer individual, but I think it would mean a lot to the longer serving supervisors. It was a split vote and some of them wanted to stay with us. So I think that would be,
Understand, but I wouldn't, I don't think we're going to distinguish between between who wanted to stay, who wanted to go.
no, okay. Well, it could just be a certificate,
Sure.
it doesn't have to be in a frame even. It can be in one of these paper folders that have like a little
Yeah.
frame in it and, and then they
Okay.
can either put it on their wall or shred it, whatever they would want to do,
Yeah, and Patty, you have a standard certificate of appreciation
Yes.
you've done in the past? Okay, and I think that would be appropriate. And do we want to make it a separate agenda item or just leave it under the last, the last comment thing?
I think we should make it a separate agenda item, and that way if other board members would be prepared if they wanted to make a comment.
Okay, good point. Just say
Mhm.
recognition of departing board members.
Right,
The,
perfect. Good suggestion, Jan.
Okay.
okay, so then speaking of that, and putting that on the full board meeting agenda, well, let's just see if we have any public comment regarding this item first.
At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press star 9. I have no one for public comment.
Okay, with that, then we will move on to item 16, which is the draft full board meeting agenda.
Yeah, and so I know that we have a couple of additions just based on our recent conversation, one with the recruitment and then 2 with the certificates for our departing members. Are there any other changes or additions that the executive committee would like to see?
I have none.
I think mine has been addressed because we will mention somewhere in the context of this agenda that we'll be having a special meeting regarding rate resolution.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
We don't need to have a separate agenda item to discuss rate resolution. This will have to happen. Okay, so no, I am okay with it, Patty, Jan, rather.
Yeah, and you will have prepared the ad hoc committee selection
Right.
item
Yes,
beforehand, right? Okay.
correct.
Yes.
Now, I think that looks good, but, and I think just as a note to mention that the first item on their agenda is going to be looking at the state mandates only provision.
Correct, that'll be.
Just sort of
mentioned.
casually mention it. So yeah, so they know that we're not ignoring them.
Right. Got it. Okay, Jeff, you have your hand raised.
Yes, my comment was on what is currently item 16, the ad hoc committee. I believe that based on discussions today, the recommendation will be slightly different and it might be agendized with a little bit different wording.
Sure.
So I'll coordinate with Patty on that. Would you like to review that, President Barbeau? I think you probably should.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
And review the staff report prior to. So
Yes,
is,
I would like to review that.
would you like Patty and I to prepare something for your review on those?
Yes,
Okay.
and then allow an extra day there for me to review it and get it back to you guys.
Oh, of course, of course.
Excellent. Okay. Any further board comments on that? Let's see if we have public comment on the full board agenda.
This time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press star 9. And nobody for public comment.
Okay. By the way, I'm checking here. I'm concerned. We do have. Do we have any? I don't see any. Well, no. Okay, hold on. Attendees. We do have some public listeners. Okay.
Yeah, we do have
What do you-
currently a couple, and we have a few more at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure we didn't, we're somehow having an inadvertent closed session here. Okay, so, all right, so we're up to any future agenda items, anything for the good of the cause? All right. If not, I think we're ready to adjourn. And Jan, I'll keep your maple candies in good shape.
Thank you. Well, hopefully we can meet in person. Next time I did have my booster 2 days ago, so I'm
Oh, did you?
almost,
Yeah.
I'm almost socially acceptable. as I
I'm
say.
not quite eligible for my booster, but I was fortunate to get
dear.
Moderna in the first place. So I have pretty good protection. So.
Well, I think you may be an essential worker.
Oh, okay. Well, nobody's ever called me that before, so.
You are now.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Charles.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
For
Good night,
adjourning.
Thank you.
Charles.